It's that time of year again where I sit down to rank every game I played in the previous year, but this time I wanted to rank them a little bit differently. I'm still sticking with the tier list, but wanted to add some texture to the ranks, and by giving them some meaning, it keeps you brainless slobs engaged. It's Rewind 2025. I've thrown the traditional S to F rank in the bin for 2025, and here's the updated tier list, just to add some spice to the proceedings. At the very top we have the S rank, inherited from the Japanese education system, and still my favourite way to glaze the best games I've played. Next up is the Dad Skills tier. These are games that my elderly hands struggled with. Good or bad, anything you find in these tiers has either caused me to swear or squeeze out an angry poo in a fit of rage. Then we have the Hitchcock tier, reserved for the games that are pure cinema. They're either gorgeous to look at or so moving that a single tear rolled down my cheeks as the credits played. Anything in it's a classic, and any game I'd consider retro, although don't let Rick Bowen know as he might get furious again. But I'm going to put games in here that are old and should get a pass because they either still stand up today or are considered classic games that define a genre. Now the Spunk tier is for any games that give you that warm feeling between your legs, but you really should be telling people that you enjoyed it, leaving you an embarrassing mess that you don't want to admit. And finally, the shit tier. Well, self-explanatory, isn't it? Devil May Cry 2, the very smelly brother of the DMC series. I've never played it and thought to myself, can it really be as bad as they say? Well, yeah, it's bad. The enemy AI is terrible, and you can beat the game with just your guns, which boils down to you just holding down one button, which I guess is fine if your other hands are preoccupied, but sometimes a guy likes to just use both. There's also the massive camera issues, and the whole experience feels like it's lacking that magic the first game had. DMC2 is a massive step down from the series, and I actually played Devil May Cry 3 first, because the internet told me that was a good idea. And if I hadn't, I probably would have given up on the series. So no surprises, this is going straight into the shit tier, for no other reason than it's an absolute pile of hot steaming shit. Am I being controversial? Maybe. Am I about to be controversial? Maybe a little bit. Super Mario Galaxy is not great, but it does have an incredibly passionate fan base who are more than likely going to rip me a new one in the comments. However, it's probably because I never owned a GameCube as a boy, so I have no nostalgia for Sunshine. And later Mario games for me are just so much better. Although I played Mario 64 this year, and that's a much better game, but we'll get onto that in a minute. Sunshine is sloppy controls, and it feels awkward to make some of the series' most demanding jumps. Most people will probably say it's just a bad game, but I've played harder Mario games where failing, it doesn't feel that bad. And most of my deaths could be put down to the wonky camera or the fact that FLUDD is drier than any smutty pun I can ever come up with. But the colours are pretty, and the soundtrack's beautiful. So if you're easily distracted by shiny things, you're either a golden retriever or a moron, which is why this one's going straight into the shit tier. Now, this is where I start to look like a moron. I was quite easily charmed by the Switch 2 welcome tour. The museum-style presentation is pretty wonderful, and it's actually quite insightful. The tech demos are super innovative and explain new features of the console, like HD Rumble and the dynamic frame rate that Nintendo's brand new console has to offer. And there's a solid amount of content here. It's about 6 to 7 hours, if you're taking it slow, like a gentleman should. The problem is that the welcome tour should be a free game, to get you all hot and sweaty under the collar for the Switch 2. But instead, it was about £6, and it left a sour taste in most people's mouths. Plus the fact that you needed some pricey peripherals like a camera or a Pro controller. And if you're not on the invite list for Epstein Island, then you're probably not going to be happy paying that kind of dollar. But for me, there was a level of detail and care woven throughout, and that's what made me put Welcome Tour into the Spunk tier. You played for a fun time, but really you don't want to tell anyone about it, if you get what I mean. At its core, Fieldrunners makes you set up a field of towers, in order to make enemies weave through a maze of death. With a clean and pleasing visual style, Fieldrunners is easy on the eye and the wallet. It cost me something like £4, and I ploughed quite a few hours into the game. But it's quite satisfying to craft efficient labyrinths, watching waves of enemies slowly, and I do mean slowly, trudge their way to death. However, Fieldrunners is not perfect. With 100 waves per level, you need to watch a lot of death before you can progress. It's like working in some sort of Dignitas facility. And in a genre way, if you've played one and you've played them all, it can feel quite passive and boring at times. It feels like one of those games you'd find in the back of a headrest on a plane, which is why I'm putting it at the top of the shit list. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it keeps my fingers busy for the times in between typing or when my wife wants to put them to work. Even for the PS3 era, where Flower's from, It had stunning, breathtaking visuals, putting you in control of a gentle breeze and giving you the task of spreading vibrant colours across pastoral lands. Flower's got a deep, satisfying feedback loop, with small goals that lead you naturally onto completing individual levels. And despite the fact that you can beat the game in under an hour, there's a beautifully crafted, emotional arc to Flower. It's the type of game that makes you lose track of time, even if it only is for an hour. And talking about time, there's no getting away from how bloody short it is. In fact, I can probably beat the game by the time I finish banging on about it. But in 2009, Flower cost $10, which is about £6 today, which seems incredibly steep for such a short experience. Although I'm sure some of you watching have paid for something else that lasted nowhere near as long. Also, the lack of motion controls if you're playing on PC does lose you some of the original immersion that the game had to offer. So where does it sit on my tier list? I'm going to slip Flower into Hitchcock. It's absolute cinema, pure and simple. If you want to try one of the most visually stunning games that 2009 had to offer, then track down a copy of Flower and play it the way God intended, on a PlayStation 3, controller in hand, giving it a waggle. Being my first video essay, The Lost Crown has a special place in my heart. Even though fans of the original 3D Sands of Time trilogy found this one a bit of a tough sell. So let's start with some of the negatives before I go on to glaze it like a donut. The Lost Crown is an incredibly slow burn. The opening few hours are dripping in a disjointed narrative and quite boring platforming. The game introduces so many new characters early on, it's tricky to give a shit about any of them. And the titular prince goes missing so early, does it really matter if you ever get him back? So for fans of the Sand of Time trilogy, this might be a bit of a tough sell. It's a very different cocktail from those original classics. However, once you get a couple of hours in, The Lost Crown starts to bang like a couple of Christians on their wedding night. The platforming starts to click, and is actually some of the best the Prince of Persia series has to offer. Take that, Jordan Mechner, you twat. And the late game gauntlets where you string together pole swings and turning back time, they're genuinely a thrill to play. Although when you're sweating your bollocks off just to get through a particularly tricky section, just to be rewarded with a Xerxes coin, it does leave a little bit of a sick taste in your mouth. So it's a fantastic game. It's not to everyone's taste, so it's going in the spunk tier. Some people like the taste, some people don't. But for anyone who hasn't had a taste yet, I would at least give it a try just once. Splinter Cell Double Agent is an absolute pain in the arse to get running on a modern PC. So with everything I'm about to say, just bear that in mind. It took me about 3 days to get the game running, and it crashed more often than a diabetic fruitarium. Now the story is pretty good. For a man who struggles to pay attention across a 20-hour gaming session, this one actually had me gripped. You play as a broken Sam Fisher, operating on both sides and adding in moral complexity and player choice that though the earlier entries lacked. And the atmosphere, it's really good. It's got gritty lighting and audio design that makes you so tense, I struggle for weeks to get a shit out. Now Double Agent does suffer with more linear levels, which does feel like a bit of a step back from the previous entries. Plus the controls actually feel wonkier than Chaos Theory. And it's actually hard as balls, which is why this is the first game making it into the dad skills tier. But that's mainly because of how hard this fucker was to get running. Once you've played Mario Odyssey, there's no going back. Odyssey controls are tighter than a duck's arsehole. It's filled with fun and varied gameplay, and it's the best 3D Mario game to date. So what about its grandfather, Super Mario 64? Well, it's an absolute bastard to control, like trying to grab a slippery child straight out of the bath. Mario feels all kinds of wonky, which can lead to lots of frustrating deaths, especially if you're shit at games like I am. Also, the camera's a bit of a turd. It's probably more of an enemy than Bowser is, with it often pointing in some weird and wonderful places. That being said, you do have to acknowledge that Mario 64 for what it is. The game that first nailed down what a 3D platformer could be. You only need to take a look at Jumping Flash on the PS1 to know what I'm talking about. Nintendo nailed practically every aspect on the very first try, which is almost improbable considering nobody had done this before. It essentially invented the template for 3D open world games, and the likes of Mario Odyssey have it to thank for that. Plus, you all know where I'm going to put it on my tier list. It's an absolute classic, and we all know it. Now, on the whole, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory is a much better game than Double Agent, which appeared earlier on in the list if you're just merrily skipping through this video. Like most of the Splinter Cell games on the PC, it's still a bastard to get running. Although, I played this on the Steam Deck in the bath, and it actually ran alright. With a couple of tweaks here and there, running older games on Proton seems to be the way to go these days, especially if you're a technology moron. Now, Chaos Theory has some of the best level design that Splinter Cell has to offer. It's got a semi-wink-wink open level design and gives you plenty of freedom to tackle missions and objectives how you'd like. Now, I'm pretty unimaginative, so tend to go in all guns blazing, which admittedly, it's not the best way to play a stealth game, but what can you do? And it's still pretty good looking, even in 2025 with the PC version being the best looker of the bunch. It's definitely worth your time if somehow you've never played it, and going firmly in the dad skills tier list. Mainly because I'm just bad at stealth games. Although, I really should be better after spending years creeping into a child's bedroom to either turn off a nightlight or to pretend to be Father Christmas. Yet another Remedy game smashed out this year, Alan Wake is the quintessential atmospheric horror experience. Looking into this one, it did have a rough release on the PC, which apparently the remaster has fixed. I'm talking about shit resolution options and forced VSync, but I didn't actually notice any of that, which is a testament to how much of a banger Alan Wake actually is. Now, I'm not going to talk any spoilers, but the story's really good. And even though the gameplay can feel repetitive and boring, I actually quite liked it. Unfair on occasion, the gunplay feels weighty, although I'm not sure how an author is so good at handling weapons. I guess he's an American. Anyway, there's atmosphere for days, the game's bloody dripping in it. And this is the one game where collectibles are actually quite fun. The manuscripts of Alan's story are strewn throughout the levels, sometimes giving you snippets of what's to come, or filling in the blanks you might have actually missed. The characters are memorable, and the voice acting's sublime, which is why Alan fits nicely in the Hitchcock tier. Now let's hope the sequel actually lives up to the original. The family game to end all family games. I don't think there's anything better than firing up a copy of Mario Kart 8 on a Saturday afternoon. It's still a bit of a looker, with a huge roster of characters and tons of tracks to race on. And being able to play on the bus, or while taking a shit, is really where Mario Kart 8 shines. It's the first portable version since the 3DS. Now it's a bit of a glorified port from the Wii U, but I never actually owned one, so for me it was a brand new experience. And if you've got kids, it's a must play. And even after the release of Mario Kart World, 8 is still a better game, and 100% worth grabbing a copy, which is why it very safely sits in the S tier. A beautiful game about a beautiful relationship between siblings. A Plague Tale: Innocence is a modern day masterpiece. The atmosphere is so thick it feels like you're living in medieval France, and you can almost feel the shit sticking to your clothes, and the smell of burning bodies on the breeze. Now it's a pretty good story. Sometimes it can't decide what it wants to be, and does slightly overstay its welcome towards the end. On occasion your AI companions gets on your tits, behave in the way that break the immersion or mess up so spectacularly that they alert the bad guys, resulting in a swift sword to the face of Amicia. Now, as a product of a small studio, this is absolutely spectacular. It's not perfect, but sometimes the best things in life aren't, like blue cheese giving you a fat ass, or a Playboy model giving you chlamydia. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pure cinema, which is why it's going straight into the top of the Hitchcock tier. Another Remedy game smashed out this year, Max Payne is the quintessential bullet time game, turning every gunfight into a cinematic John Woo style shootout. You know, that kind of experience that gives you a not so unwanted erection. And the gameplay at times is a psychological mindfuck. That time you see a dead baby, and as a dad, that shit hits you harder than a hangover in your mid-30s. And the story is Viagra solid. Coming from a decade where gritty games were still trying to find their feet, Sam Lake managed to pull something special out of the bag. Now, like a middle child, it does have its problems. The controls can feel clunky to a modern day gamer. Enemies can feel controller-throwingly unfair at times. And working out how to take down that helicopter at the end of the game, it made me want to rip my own dick off so many times. But it's a classic, and I don't think anyone can disagree with that. So basically, it goes straight into the classic tier. Capiche? Now, the original Devil May Cry is nothing short of revolutionary for its time. One of the very first hack and slash games, and countless other titles used it as a blueprint for years to follow. Dante is about as iconic as it gets for video game characters, up there with Mario, Solid Snake and Ozzy Osbourne. The Gothic castle is a great setting and lends itself to the genre beautifully. Now, having played quite a few of the Resi games this year, it's quite easy to tell that actually Devil May Cry was supposed to be one, and the bosses and the enemies scattered throughout the levels are nothing short of instantly iconic. Now, the fixed camera can be a bit of a pain in the arse, and it's the cheesiest game I've ever played, but it's super charming. Plus, the plot and the characters are paper thin, and whoever came up with this control scheme must have been clinically insane. Like, who maps the gun to the square button? Seriously? But the question is, what tier do I put Devil May Cry in? Realistically, it could sit in the S tier. It's a fantastic game after all. Or it could go into the classics tier, because it absolutely is a classic. But I'm going to put it straight into the dad skills tier, because it's really hard. Again, it's Viagra hard, and I'm really shit at the game. Still, I loved it. I've got no nostalgia for Resident Evil 3. I was 12 when the original released, and far too much of a wuss to actually play anything remotely scary. But 30 years later, I'm ever so slightly braver, and Capcom have created some beautiful remakes of their horror classics. But I absolutely love the Resident Evil 3 remake. To start off with, Jill Valentine is the perfect main character. She's funny with an intense goth edge that us 90s kids are addicted to. It's a full-paced action romp from start to finish, good to look at, with a new addition of a dodge that the games have been begging for. A side note, as I'm writing this, I've recently played the Resident Evil 4, the original one. And yeah, it's a bloody good game, but boy is it gagging for a roll. And they might have added one in the remake, to be fair. So watch out for Rewind 2029 when I might have actually played it. Now the length of Resident Evil 3 is the elephant in the room. 6 hours feels like just enough to get you going, get your Viagra hard once again, and then bam, the fuck is done and dusted. And as I was basically coming directly from the Resident Evil 2 remake, it constantly feels like the smelly sibling. It's shorter, less ambitious, and reusing assets in ways that are hard to ignore. But in my eyes, it's still an S tier because you can play it twice to solve the issues of how short it is. The opening train section in Resident Evil 0 is genuinely one of the most atmospheric settings for the entire series. A luxury train overrun with leeches and zombies, with a real sense of claustrophobic dread that sets a great tone. And swapping between Billy and Rebecca adds in some genuinely interesting gameplay. It's not always perfect. Sometimes your AI partner's a retard and is next to useless, and it's not always clear what you're supposed to be doing. But going back to Resident Evil 4 as a comparison again, the pixels are like a million times more interesting, and it's a bit mind-bending, and dare I say it, it's a better story. Now it does try maybe a little bit too hard to be a meaningful prequel, with the timeline logic that barely holds together when placed alongside the events of the other games. But this is Resident Evil. Do we come here for the story, or do we come here to spend 10 hours looking at our protagonist's arse? Saying that, it's a really difficult game. If you're easily scared and crap at Resi games, which I am, which is why it lives firmly in the dad skills tier, mainly because I managed to make it all the way to the credits without soiling my chords. A stone cold classic. Halo 2 is one with a very specific reputation for one particular reason. The introduction of the Arbiter is genuinely good storytelling for a first-person shooter. Switching up the perspective to allow you to play as a Covenant and Elite adds real depth to the universe, and it makes the conflict feel more meaningfully two-sided. Now in practice, playing as the Arbiter doesn't actually feel that much different from being inside the helmet of Master Chief. But it was a fun angle for sure, and bringing dual wielding to the Halo series, it felt like it should have been there from the beginning. And with notably smarter AI, it represents a genuine step forward from Combat Evolved. Plus being able to switch between the fancy new graphics of the Master Chief collection and the original, it's bloody amazing. I just found myself switching between them every 30 seconds and getting very little gaming done. Now, obviously, Halo 2 is not without its flaws. Otherwise it'd be at the top of the list, wouldn't it? The flood levels remain as bollocks as ever. It's part of the series that most of us gamers tolerate rather than enjoy. And Halo 2's got more of them than I'd like. This might be in part because the game's pretty hard in those sections. And the Graveman level in particular is a notorious spike in difficulty that tips from challenging into genuinely punishing on high difficulties, which I didn't actually play through, should I add. But Halo 2 is considered to be one of the foundation stones that modern shooters are now built on, which is why it's going straight into the classic tier. Resident Evil 2 is a gold standard for a modern Resident Evil remake, and it's one that sets the bar impossibly high for Resident Evil 3, which is probably why Resident Evil 3 didn't hit the same way as this one. The smart changes merge with the classic design expertly. The atmosphere is rich with gorgeous lighting and incredible sound design that makes the Raccoon City Police Department feel genuinely oppressive and alive, which made me, you guessed it, Viagra hard throughout. And with the addition of Mr. X constantly breathing down your neck, I feel like you don't get a second to relax. More than any other game I've played in the franchise so far, Resident Evil 2 does a fantastic job of maintaining a constant tone of danger, which is exactly what survival horror should do in my opinion. The pistol's a bit of a pain in the arse, making you pump a fuck ton of bullets into even the most basic of enemies. And the boss fights, while they're atmospheric, they're mechanically thin. Most boil down to you hitting a weak point, usually a massive bulging eye that you have to hit repeatedly, rather than anything more inventive. It's still an S tier though. I'm not sure any other Resi game will come to top this one. I've still got a few to play through though, so let's see what Rewind 2027 has to say. Let's start with the feather in the cap of Super Mario Wonder, the Wonder Flowers. It's the best thing to happen to a 2D Mario in decades. Every level feels like a fever dream where the rules of reality are tossed out of the window. delivering constant, genuine, embarrassingly gasp-inducing surprises. The animations are utterly outstanding, with those bastard Goombas looking up in dread as you jump on their faces. And when Mario grabs his hat and going through a pipe, it's kind of cute. Everything you wonder is bursting with cartoon personality in a way that new Super Mario Bros. Games never were. Plus, the badge system's brilliantly designed, ranging from accessibility options for the kids, all the way to the final gauntlet of the game, which ends in you being invisible and dying so much you want to cram your controller up your arse. Now that's probably the biggest flaw of Mario Wonder. The difficulty is the biggest sticking point. Even the special stages are rarely challenging enough to satisfy even the hardened players, and you can comfortably wrap up the main journey in a single weekend, if I ever actually managed to find that much time to myself. But this is one of the first times I've been able to enjoy a Mario game as a family, and for that reason alone, Mario Wonder is always going to hold a special place, and it's always going to be an S tier. Another remake of another beloved video game. Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch is generally one of the best games I've played this year. The toy box art style is absolutely stunning. Link and the island inhabitants feel like shiny, cartoony figures come to life, giving the whole game a wonderfully unique visual identity unlike any other Zelda game that's come before it. The atmosphere is like any other Zelda game as well. It's kind of weird, but it's charming, and unhurried in a way that invites exploration rather than urgency. I must have spent 20 or so hours plodding around the island. Link's Awakening really is a game where the journey is more important than the destination. Saying that, the story has a genuinely surprising emotional payoff for a Zelda game. The ending lands with real grown-up emotions, especially as I was going in blind. Also, the fact that the Switch 2 has about 19 times more buttons than the Game Boy means that having access to more items without constantly diving into the menus fixes one of the original's most bollock-squeezing limitations. Now, I don't have any real downsides for Link's Awakening, apart from the fact that it's a bit pricey for a game that's 32 years old. It's genuinely impressive how well the core design holds up, given its age, and though some of the more obtuse puzzle logic is very much a product of its era, when games expected you either to figure everything out yourself or spunk money up the wall for a strategy guide. But if you can find it second-hand for cheap, this is going to be a game you'll never regret seeing through to the end. It's an S tier. It's probably the best indie game that's ever been made. Hollow Knight's a game I literally couldn't put down until I'd seen everything it had to offer. The world of Hollow Nest is compelling and rich, full of story left for you to discover on your own, built with branching paths that offer you an extraordinary amount of choice in how you explore it. Now, some people won't like the indirect storytelling. While it's incredibly atmospheric, it's been known to leave thick players feeling genuinely lost or disconnected from the game's story. And let's face it, most people need to watch a lore video afterwards to fully understand what happened. But it's a story about bugs, not Shawshank Redemption. But that's probably one of the most incredible things about Hollow Knight. It's a game so good it makes you care about a bug's life. The combat is fast and fluid, and beating a tough boss after repeated attempts delivers a genuine sense of mastery that few games can replicate. Add to that the sheer volume of content is absolutely staggering. It's got 30 unique bosses, multiple endings, optional areas, and hidden secrets that reward hundreds of hours of play, all for the fraction of the price of a AAA game. It's no wonder people spend weeks of their lives devoted to Hollow Knight. Honestly, I don't think I have the right words to describe how much I love Hollow Knight. It's as damn near perfect as a video game can get. So obviously, it's getting a very obvious S tier. And the only reason it's not at the very top of my tier list is because the one that is managed to cure my anxiety. So even the world's crappiest game could be at the top of anyone's tier list if it helps make them feel normal again. Now, if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you probably know what my top game of 2025 was. It helped cure my anxiety, and it's easily the best game of the 3D All-Stars collection. It's Super Mario Galaxy. It's the epitome of a 3D platformer. Games just don't get any better. And because it's recently been re-released on the Switch 2, this timeless classic now running in 4K looks and plays better than ever. Despite being more linear than Super Mario 64 or Sunshine, the tighter structure leads to a smoother, more consistent experience. Each galaxy feels unique and handcrafted rather than padded out, and each level's just dripping in charm. The individual soundtracks are memorable and beautiful. Full orchestral arrangements that elevate each single world and remain some of the finest music Nintendo has ever produced. The only thing really holding it back is the now archaic live system, which Nintendo shortly ditched after the Galaxy games. But once you've amassed 99 lives, then this doesn't become a problem anymore. Also, no, the motion controls, they're not great, let's be honest. Especially when playing in handheld mode. Gets you feeling like that expensive handheld console might go whizzing out of your hands and out of an open window. But it's as close to perfect as a game can get. Now, I might be slightly seeing this through rose-tinted glasses, but it's getting the highest recommendation I can give it. It's the top of the list, it's going in the S tier. Honestly, what more do you want at this point? And there you have it, that's the full list. 20 games, 1 year, 1 dad and his sofa, with a crippling inability to finish any jobs around the house because I'm playing something before midnight. When I sat down to do this, I didn't think I'd accidentally stumble into a therapy session. Turns out, if you play the original Devil May Cry trilogy in a short space of time, you go through 5 stages of grief in about 45 minutes. I also played 3 Resident Evil games in a single year, which I'm fairly sure qualifies me as some sort of survival horror expert. And somewhere between Alan Wake and Max Payne, I realised I have a type, and that type is an emotionally damaged man in a long coat who narrates his own suffering. But here's the thing, for all the cynicism and the janky cameras and the dodgy AI, and games that absolutely did not need to be 15 hours long, I loved every minute of it. Apart from Devil May Cry 2. Devil May Cry 2 can get in the bin. But there's something to be said about sitting down with a game, giving it your full attention and letting it take you somewhere, and that never gets old. Even when that somewhere is a grey, poorly lit warehouse full of demons that are standing completely still while you shoot them. Well, I've been the game dad, stealing the hours where I can find them. And honestly, for the games I managed to complete in 2025, I wouldn't have it any other way. I'll see you next year.